All right, hello and welcome to the webinar. This is the Secrets of Golf Rehab and Performance here with Integrated Rehab and Performance Center. Just doing a couple checks here to make sure that everything is doing what it's supposed to be doing. This is the first time we did this, and sorry if it's a little bit loud. I did some testing earlier, and I was very loud. So turn me down if you have to. What I got for you is a slideshow with the four big or key points of golf rehab that we're seeing here at Integrated Performance, and some of the performance metrics as well. So what I really want to chat about or talk about first is sharing with you guys essentially the secrets of what we're seeing with the golf swing. What's the latest? What is what are the research saying? What's TPI saying? What is actually happening in an actual golf swing, right? From there, we'll be able to give you a little bit more information about how or what this means for you, how you can manipulate this information to be a little bit more productive with your rehab, with your performance training, your gym training, and then of course with your lessons and out there on the golf course practicing. So this is what we got for you. We'll get into the slideshow here, and I'll walk you through it step by step. We're going to start with some of the finer details of the kinematic sequence. After the kinematic sequence, one of my favorite things to talk about, we're going to dive into the kinetic sequence, which is more force and force development, and then with that, the biomechanics. So first, what's happening in the golf swing, actually, right, in the best golfers in the world? What is the timing and the sequencing? What does that look like? Then two, we're going to go into, well, what does that mean from a biomechanics perspective, or from my perspective, a rehab chiropractor? What does that mean from a mobility perspective? And then, of course, what are the forces involved, which is the kinetic sequence? So if the kinematic sequence is telling us what's happening in the golf swing, the kinetic sequence is telling us why or how you're doing it, right? That's the forces that are being put into the ground that actually moves us. And there's a timing and an amplitude of those forces, which actually creates the kinematic sequence or the proper motion. So we'll talk about what the heck that is. And with that, a little bit of what do I even need? What's my baseline minimum that I need to even create these patterns, right, of which is the golf swing. So that's the biomechanics, right? Think of it like mobility. What do I need from each joint to be able to do this without having any sort of restrictions or problems, okay? After that, we'll go a little bit into the body swing connection. Very interesting. I've written plenty of articles on this kind of topic. Think of it like this. You have pain, possibly. We have swing characteristics that we're working on. Maybe it's a slide. And we have maybe mobility problems. Which one came first, and are they related? That's what we talk about, and talk about that a lot here with patients and clients, right? This body swing connection, this trio, mobility, pain, and mechanics, right? What's happening in the swing? Did your low back pain create an early extension pattern, or did an early extension pattern create your low back pain? Is a hip or foot pronation restriction behind the slide that you're having? And is that slide what's creating that extra compression on your mid and low back, creating low back pain, right? Which one came first? Are they related or are they not related? And so that's what's kind of getting missed here with a lot of rehab. Low back pain, go rub the low back, right? Shoulder pain, let's rub on the shoulder, right? Let's do some external rotation exercises. There's so much more going on, and we can build these things together and connect these dots. For folks without pain, swing characteristics, right? We got the swing characteristic and we have the mobility, stability, motor control stuff. Maybe we have a history of pain, not painful anymore, but our patterns have changed because of these old compensations that came when we did have pain. If you have an ACL injury, if you have a hip replacement, if you have a knee problem, whatever it might be, even if we're not feeling that anymore, I can almost guarantee you there are patterns within you that are from these old injuries that the brain and body is trying to protect, even though it doesn't have to. So we have to work back into that and work through that. So that's kind of body swing connection. And then I'll go over briefly just some of the common pain points. What's most common that we're seeing here with Nashville golfers in terms of pain and injury specifically? What are PTs getting wrong? What are other chiros getting wrong? What are the MDs getting wrong? And then I have some articles written on all these different topics that you just shoot me a DM. My email will be at the end. You shoot me a question. I think you all have my email from the RSVP. And let me know what you want. Is there a specific article I can send you? Is there a specific topic you want to chat about? Give me a call, whatever it might be. We'll make it happen. with this, we have, I asked kind of where your home course was on the RSVPs, and we have Richland represented, we have Governors, Legends, and I think there's a few Belmead as well, maybe one or two Golf Club, and some of my friends down there at the Grove. So we're well represented here this afternoon with folks signing up for the newsletter. Hopefully you saw something from your clubs. I got most of them agreed to send it out. I think a lot of it kind of got lost. But either way, the newsletter was sent out to everyone as well. So hopefully we got some new friends in here too. All right, a little bit of background. This is me, chiropractor by license. You won't recognize what we do in here much as chiropractic. We use the technique. It's really beneficial. It's really great for certain joint restrictions, but it's not a solution to anything. It's a great tool. I did my master's in exercise science, bachelor's exercise science, and doctor of chiropractic. The real magic's in all the other stuff. So some of the TPI background stuff, really great for the data and information, but it's how you use the data that's really important. That's where SFMA, PRI, McKenzie, DNS, all these other things come into play. And what we've really done is blend a lot of the stuff together to create a pretty unique treatment potential for clients and students and patients, but also really this comprehensive exam, which we'll talk a little bit about later, is the magic. That's the key. All the data that we collect, and then our ability to kind of connect these dots. So that's me as the founder here of Integrated Rehab and Performance Center. Here's an example, just so you know what the heck goes on here. This is actually an intensive program patient that we had in, which means that he flew in from different states to come work with us. That's our intensive program that we have available to folks. Longtime golfer, memberships all over the world, loves to golf. 1 to 2 annual golf outings with college friends. He had recurring pain while golfing and exercising that started to create spasms in the mid and low back. Eventually, these spasms turned into pretty consistent spasms, enough to actually bring him down to the floor, and he actually had to get taken out in an ambulance at a PGA event that he was there spectating. So they got pretty severe. This is his history. He's had club foot, born with club foot, both feet, corrected at birth, but of course it has left some serious problems in both feet, restrictions and stability problems. Now, as he was getting treatment for his low back, the PTs rubbed the low back and worked on the low back. In his golfing and his lessons, pros trying to work on speed and power, they worked on his ground reaction forces, so good for them. The thing is they didn't understand that with his feet, his connection to the ground, he really could not get into the positions that they were asking him to get into and use the ground like he needed to, right? The ground reaction forces weren't coming because he had such stability and motor control problems at the foot and ankle, right? Pretty significant. And so now we got two things. We're working on the low back, we're working on drills to create ground reaction forces, but the body's just not there to do it. And so it was pretty obvious to us that there's this common link between his problems, his swing problems, and his pain. And there's the foot and ankle completely getting missed. And so that's what we worked on. We did 4 days as our intensive program, 2 sessions, first comprehensive eval, then a session, and then 2 the next day. And then depending on where you're at, we'll do 3-hour sessions on day 3 and 4, or we'll split that. And then we'll actually hook them up with a local golf pro as well. Just depending on what their needs, I'd like to put them with a good fit from the different pros that I've done work with and podcasts with, just so as we make some changes here, they can start to use it here right away. Results, 100% eliminations, pain and spasms. When you work on the foot, a lot of great things start to happen. When you work on the common links, a lot of great things happen. Golf trips, member guest weekends, all that without pain, right? We're completely on a different end of the spectrum now. There's no pain, no spasms, really not worrying about it anymore. And then he finally eliminated this big swing characteristic he had, which is this major sway. Now that we can actually stabilize through the foot and create vertical forces and immediate increase in distance with that. So wonderful. Still working with him today remotely. He's doing great. Takeaway, understand the biomechanics, understand the golf swing, a comprehensive eval to understand where your biomechanics and mobility is at, and then we can create a plan to address the common link, especially. And for him, it was the foot and ankle. One of my BCCs, we're just working on separation here, some simple drills, right? And so we're just trying to create pelvic rotation without the trunk moving. Here you can see the trunk's moving. And so we had to take a step back. And again, this is a very simple drill here just to get an understanding of what we're about to talk about, which is the kinematic sequence. So pelvic movement, sternum stays pointing the opposite direction. And now we put him back in this open chain with the band, and he's able to do it much better. this is probably number one thing we work on here is just trying to get this separation and lead side force creation. So let's see. An understanding of what TPI is all about, Test Performance Institute. I think they got great data. That's the most important thing about them. Scotty's Chiro here, explaining his role and kind of what we do here in Integrated Rehab. They're the pit crew, right? I'm pit crew chief. Hopefully you're investing in some strength conditioning, longevity stuff. Hopefully you're investing in some lessons. And then hopefully you're investing in some kind of rehab and body work. Something that's going to take a real deep look under the hood and see what's going on with you. It's going to make your ability to exercise for a long time possible, to take lessons for a long time possible, and to play golf for a long time possible, just to make sure that the right pieces are being addressed, right? And that's what our role is here. Their philosophy, there's a million different ways to swing, but there's one efficient way to swing for you. That doesn't mean that every swing has to look the same. Really, it really depends on what your body can do. And from there, can we put you in a better position? Can we improve your body so that your efficient swing is even better, right? We'll maximize your efficient swing. So long as it's repeatable, controllable, and we create max power with little effort. That's what we're looking to do. Not trying to make everyone swing the same. Again, I'm not a swing professional, so I don't touch that. What I like to do is just make sure the body is getting to where it needs to be based off your goals and your background. And then it makes the swing professional's life a whole lot easier when we can get you there. I like to put you in positions to challenge you a little bit. And try to get you to feel these things. And that's what we'll do. But when it comes down to it, you got to get in front of someone who's going to walk you through this process of actually making those small tweaks to your swing. All right, number one, kinematic sequence. Love to talk about this. I usually start all my workshops with this idea of the kinematic sequence. So what is it? With the kinematic sequence, we're talking specifically about what is your body doing, moving. So we're just looking at the pelvis, the trunk, the shoulder, and the club, and what is it doing through a golf swing. Everything on the left side of this line here is the backswing. So from address to top of backswing, you see all the lines are below the x-axis here. It just means it's moving, if you're a right-handed golfer, to the right, right? It's moving into the backswing. Now, what's important to see is that even though the top of the backswing is here, a few of these things cross the line before you've reached your top of the backswing. This means they go from moving backwards to moving forward before you finish the backswing. Critical. You see what moves first is the pelvis. Your pelvis, and the best golfers in the world, is moving towards the target, rotating left if you're a right-handed golfer, before you finish your backswing. And it's the first thing to initiate that downswing. Super important, one of the most important aspects of the golf swing. Okay, from there, the trunk moves, then the arms, and then finally the club. And you can see, moving on to the next slide here with the descriptions, is that the pelvis will peak. Now, y-axis is speed, peaks its speed just before the trunk does. And that peaks just before the arm does, and that speed peaks just before the club does. What we're seeing here is pelvic initiates movement first as the trunk is still moving towards the right. Then that pulls the trunk towards it, and now the trunk peaks speed higher, and that starts moving left before even the arms do, which with this moving fast now pulls arms with it. The arms now move even faster than the trunk does, and that peaks its speed just before the club comes down into impact. That's efficient speed and power. It's this kinematic sequencing of left or downswing sequencing and speed peaking. Both of those things create the kinematic sequence in the best golfers in the world. And that's how you create efficient speed without looking like you're trying very hard. All right. The thing is that requires some mobility, stability, and motor control. Right? If we're going to separate pelvis from trunk, well, that means that we need to have a lot of mobility at the pelvis and through T-spine rotation. And it also means we need to be able to contract muscles that move the pelvis this way while turning the trunk back the other way, right? To do these things is pretty athletic, and it requires mobility, and it requires some strength stability. That's the kinematic sequence, and that's what every golfer, every top-level golfer in the world does. No matter what their swing looks like, this sequence is in there. And now, again, the great thing is it can look different. We can have a ton of side tilt and all sorts of different things, and maybe one elbow comes higher than the other. But the thing is they're all going to move in this sequence and this timing. And so part of the process here is seeing where you're at on this, but also making sure that the baseline even mobility metrics are there to make this even possible, right? And so that you and your swing professional have better luck, whether they're working on this or not, or whether they know they're working on it or not, and whatever drills that are using, it's getting back to this. Now, here's one when it comes to the kinematic sequence. Get left earlier. So when we're trying to create this separation, we talked about it, the pelvis moves first before you even finish the backswing. If you think you're going to go out tonight, tomorrow, get on the range and just start turning your pelvis before you finish the backswing, you're not going to. It feels like you're getting left earlier, but you are not. So it has to be sooner than you even think. And again, I wouldn't recommend even trying to do this without a little bit of guidance on it, essentially, and making sure that the body's available to do it in the first place. But to dissociate this lower body from the upper body, right, it creates, first of all, it allows for this separation and this efficiency, but it requires a lot from the biomechanics perspective. Now, folks with low back pain, rib pain, and abdominal strain and sprain, it's going to make this really hard. The brain body's not going to want to create this separation if there's pain in these regions. If hip mobility is a problem, this becomes very, very difficult. Number one thing I work on, number one thing I write about is hip mobility in Nashville golfers. And then pelvic motor control and trunk stability. If you don't have the trunk stability, if you can't keep this trunk here while this moves below it, because it's going to pull on it, then you won't. And these two things are going to move as a chunk, right? So when we start working on this stuff, number one thing you'll hear, sooner, earlier, left, sooner, right? Over and over and over again. It's really difficult to kind of grasp until you get it once. It's like, that feels terrible, until it kind of starts to feel better. Now, number two, first of all, that's the kinematic sequence. That's the secret of the golf swing. That's what's happening. All the best golfers in the world, no matter who they are. Again, their swing can look different, but this is what we want to get to. Now, the question is, what is physically required to make that happen? Biomechanics-wise and force production-wise. So force production, like where the actual force is coming from, which moves the body, right, moves the joints, is the kinetic sequence. But first, if I were to break it down into the top most important joints and what we need from them to create the kinematic sequence, would start at shoulder external rotation at 90 degrees or further. So that's this move here. Can we get to fingertips up and beyond? Shoulder external rotation, especially important on that trail side shoulder. You cannot create separation from the trunk and the shoulder if we're missing a lot of space for external rotation, because the shoulder is essentially being whipped or pulled into a little bit extra external rotation the moment that trunk starts to go, which is fantastic if you're trying to create efficient speed, not great if you don't have shoulder mobility to do it, right? So we need good shoulder external rotation mobility. We need good thoracic spine rotation, at least 45 degrees. 60 would be better, but minimum 45 degrees. Because again, we need to be able to turn trunk into a big backswing and then create that downswing rotation as well. We need to be able to turn the thoracic spine 45 degrees or more. Hip internal and external rotation, 30 internal, 45 external. Everything turns right, pelvis starts turning left. Pelvis is sitting on your hips, which means, and our feet are planted, so the pelvis has to turn on top of a stable hip. Hip doesn't know the difference. It's rotation, external and internal rotation. We need 30 versus 45 for internal external rotation at the hips. Totally neglected, foot pronation and supination. If we're going to keep our feet grounded, that doesn't mean that the joints of that foot aren't interacting or moving with the weight above it. And so we actually supinate in that right foot in the backswing, and then the arch comes down and drives in the downswing, which is pronation. The foot needs to be able to play along. If you have brick for feet, you won't be able to access internal rotation above it. You won't be able to create separation. You won't be able to create a stable base. It's just not going to happen. So totally missed in a lot of rehab and performance plans. And then tibial internal external rotation, another little one that gets missed, and it helps with foot mechanics. It also helps with the hip above it. Now, what we also need in terms of strength stability and awareness is trunk and core stability, because again, the pelvis is going to move below it, and this trunk needs to be strong enough and mobile enough to be here. And then pelvic motor control, because we just talked about, we're moving this thing independently of it. A lot of folks don't have any idea how to do that. We test it in here, and it's like, I have no idea how to make that happen without moving trunk with it. We're so totally connected. So really important, pelvic motor control and then trunk core stability. In terms of the kinetics, this is the kinetic sequence. So we've included the timing of these forces as well. First thing that happens as we start to go and try and initiate the downswing, just like as this pelvis turns towards the target first before we even finish the backswing, we also get this lateral force. So now we're talking in terms of forces, which means the feet are pushing into the ground to push our body towards the target. That happens as we are initiating that downswing. Then there's this what they call rock and roll torque, which is a rotation torque, but it's rotation this way, kind of ear down towards hip, right? This side bend of the trunk. Lateral force, then the feet create ground reaction forces that torque us in this rock and roll. And then we create what everyone thinks is the only thing happening, which is this twist or rotation around that central axis. And then the last thing is the sagittal plane or near shaft vertical. We get this flexion and extension. So think forward and back. And what we do is we end up getting and extending and getting tall. That's another torque. It's kind of a rotation. On top of that, the lead side, right before and right kind of at impact, is maximizing its vertical forces. So think about jumping on your left side. You see these golf drills where we're trying to jump from that left foot or that lead side foot over an object or something. That's us trying to train this vertical force. I got a lot of problems with that because no one ever does it well. And we talk about that in here. You can jump your foot over something. It doesn't mean you got your weight on that foot. It doesn't mean you're creating a lot of vertical forces. High vertical forces create speed. Just jumping over top something will not create high verticals or high speed, right? You got to make sure you're doing it correctly. But this is the kinetic sequence. These torques and forces here move your body to hit golf ball, right? And it's the timing of these things that puts body in the right position to create an efficient golf swing, right? The only way you can move something is by putting pressure or force into something else and that pushing back. And that's what the ground and the earth is there to do. You put pressure down through the feet, it moves your joints above it. These are where the ground reaction forces are happening and at the time. So it's important to know that because when joints start moving better and we want to start integrating back into the golf swing, we start manipulating these ground reaction forces and this sequencing so that these things start falling into place, right? And make sure that we can create these forces based on your background. If you have a history of knee problems, boy, we're going to be working a lot on that lead side vertical force. And just make sure that we can do that when the time comes. That's the kinetic sequence. The secret to speed and power in the golf swing is the kinetic sequence and maximizing your ability to create these three different torques, which is flexion and extension, side bend and twist, as well as this lateral force and this straight vertical force up, especially on the lead side. And what we can do is break those down into its components and work on them individually and then pull them back together. Now, for you specifically, how do we identify the ability or inability to create the kinematic sequence? Now, it helps to have 3D motion analysis, right? For the kinematic sequence, the first thing we looked at, and we can just monitor and change, put you on a graph and see how each segment is moving independent of each other and the timing of that. We don't have that in here. Most folks don't. From our perspective, what we can do is do a TPI movement screen and a comprehensive biomechanics exam. So the TPI screen is great. I love it for before and after. It breaks down the different components of the kinematic sequence and just sees, do we have the baseline standard movement available to even do this stuff? But it misses a ton. What it misses is the details. So what we've built into that comprehensive evaluation, which I've mentioned, that folks will travel here to come get looked at, is the details, right? We're looking at every single individual joint and see what's available to it. Then we see, okay, we're missing availability of these joints. How does that connect to our TPI screen and our other global movement screens? And how does that connect to your pain, right? And so what we find are the common links. These are the detailed common links between your pain, if it's available, if it's there, and your swing characteristics, right? And we just build that back up. And so we see to what degree do we have access to hip internal rotation, like we talked about earlier, shoulder external rotation, and a million other things. And that gives us the plan. What do we address first? Don't miss out on this in your performance plans and in your treatment plans. If you have discomfort, and if you've been working with someone trying to improve your golf performance, we have to address this stuff. Now, there's a ton here. This is a real exam that we did, a 5-part exam, 2 parts on the other screen or on the next slide. Ton of data, don't worry about it. I'll break it down for you. What I've highlighted in red is things that we've connected to a slide that this patient was having that he's been working on for forever and just cannot seem to fix. Finally, we looked at the body. Our first global movement screen here at the SFMA, one thing we found was that we're missing multi-segmental rotation. To both sides, left is worse. Well, we're sliding into our lead side and not creating that vertical force we just talked about. Well, we see in terms of mobility that your body won't turn into that side. Interesting. We don't know why yet, but we know that's a major restriction. TPI, related to what we found, is all this stuff, but specifically we have a pelvic rotation problem, which is essentially us saying, can you separate the pelvis from the trunk, or kinematic sequence? And we certainly cannot. And we see that his left side pulls the hips and knees with it, right? These things just cannot disconnect from each other. And he even has this hip impingement, right? So left side hip impingement, pain, a slide through that same left side, and we cannot dissociate pelvic from trunk. Interesting. In terms of trunk rotation, right, T-spine rotation, left is stuck at 45 degrees. I don't like TPI's trunk rotation test, but stuck at 45 degrees, man, we'd like that to be more. And we see in this lower quarter rotation test that we are just missing left hip internal rotation, right? Left is even worse. All very important, but we're absent the details here. Let's take a look. Part 3. We have 8 degrees of left hip internal rotation. We want that number to be 30 minimum. So we have major restriction at both hip for internal rotation, a little bit more so on this lead side. You can't prevent a slide, which is basically your body saying, hey, if we're not going to rotate into the side, what we'll do is just kind of break through and we'll use the frontal plane instead. Yeah, we can't rotate into the side. Lower quarter rotation test makes sense. We only have 8 degrees of hip internal rotation. Makes sense we can't rotate the whole body to the left. The hip won't do it. We also see this Ober's test tells me more about what the orientation of that pelvis is. Is it an anterior tilt, posterior tilt? Basically, is it in a position that's going to take space away from the hip? And on the right side, negative. It does not. It's not a positive test. Left side, positive. It is taking away space from that hip. Makes sense that we're missing a little bit more on that left side and that we have a slide in the golf swing. Also makes sense that we're getting pain in that left hip and impingement. We don't have any mobility there, and the pelvic orientation is taking away even more space. Turns out we're missing some rotation through the thoracic spine to the left, more so than to the right. 45 is the minimum we're looking for here. 60 would be great. So major restriction in left T-spine rotation. So now coming back to the swing characteristic of a left slide, how is he not going to slide here? Doesn't have the hip mobility for it. Doesn't have the trunk or T-spine rotation to get into that left side. Nothing is letting him get left. He's got pain. Brain is trying to protect that left hip. We're not going to get tall and strong on that left side and turn through it if it's uncomfortable and if we don't have the space. Everything screams impingement. Everything screams slide when we look at the details here. Supination and pronation is missing at both feet. Another thing that's going to make it difficult to turn into the left side. And we have a heel or that calcaneus bone. We have a restriction through there, which we work on quite a bit. Just related to that supination and pronation restriction. Plenty of shoulder stuff going on, but we won't get into it. Special testing, core swing analysis, slide. Prone double leg raise was positive, low back tightness and tension, saying that, hey, our hip extension pattern is low back and hamstring and no glute max. Glute max, when it contracts, will pull that pelvis back out of that anterior orientation that we have. It's absent. It's not doing its job. So all these details kind of work together to tell a story here, and we kind of just told the story of the slide. He's got some other characteristics here, but if I broke it down just by slide, those are everything that's related to that. If I broke down just by hip pain, we'd highlight the same stuff. All the stuff's related to your hip pain. If we broke down just by hip internal rotation restriction, we'd see that this slide is related to that, and the hip pain is related to that, right? So all these things are kind of connected. You can't just work on one thing, hip pain, because we'd miss out on the T-spine and the foot problem, and vice versa, right? So this is how all that data works together. That is the body swing connection, and let's talk about it a little bit more. Common body swing connections that we had there. We talked about the slide and all the things related to that. Reverse spine angle, he had in the swing analysis. What else is there? Positive Ober's test relates to that. Hip mobility relates to that. Spine rotation restriction relates to that. And of course, chronic low back pain relates heavily to this reverse spine angle. If you don't know reverse spine angle, at the top of your backswing, you can go look at a video of yourself If your head is pointing towards the target at the top of your backswing, that's a reverse spine angle. You really prefer to be here. Now, there's some fantastic golfers on the tour that do demonstrate a little bit of a reverse spine angle, and maybe we can get some speed, a little bit of extra speed that way, but it does come at a cost. It's a ton of compression through the facet joints of that low back. So again, important to see if you have chronic low back stuff and you're a golfer, let's take a look at your swing. What is happening? It could be related. We can improve your performance. That sounds nice, but it's also just if we really want to attack this low back pain, we have to look at that. Early extension, Ober's test is a player in that. Again, if we don't have good pelvic orientation, it's going to shoot us forward, right? And so we can play this game all day long with the body swing connection. It gets missed all the time where we don't look at all these different components. For everyone here watching the webinar and watching the recording of it, it's not going to be you. You're someone that's going to be kind of aware of these things. These things are connected. These things are important, and you're going to make sure that you get behind it. Look at your swing a little bit more. Look at your mobility. Have someone look at your mobility, and then take a history of your pain and past injuries. What is all available? Let's put it on the whiteboard, the chessboard, and let's look at it. What's connected, and what can we do about it? So don't ever think that if you're having the same lesson over and over again that it might not be something else going on. It could be a shoulder restriction problem, right? Whatever it might be. Now, the most common pain points in Nashville golfers: low back pain, shoulder pain, knee pain. Doesn't say I don't get plenty of hips, right, or elbows and wrists, but these are the top three. 100% low back pain. For anyone dealing with low back stuff or has in the past or is concerned they might in the future, common issues: facet irritation. If you have a reverse spine angle, we're going to do away with that, right? Not if you got low back pain, we're done with that. Facet irritation, which is the small joints in the vertebrae that kind of connect and create some stability there, they get sheared and move around on top of each other, and sometimes they get irritated and create inflammation. It can be chronic. Disc bulge, of course, disc problems create a whole lot of trouble for the low back and even the nerves as they leave, as they get compressed, and now we get sometimes that pain that leaves the leg and goes down the leg into the foot. Stenosis, where we have this narrowing of that spinal canal, put some pressure on the spinal cord and even sometimes the nerves as they leave, and again you get some of that radiating pain. Very important to discern, is this a stenosis or a disc bulge problem. Sprains and strains of that low back are also very common, and they can get chronic too, especially as we keep playing, or if we don't move out of positions that put that muscle through some tension. Again, that becomes a chronic problem. And then sciatica, which is different in the fact that this is happening outside of the spine. It's happening usually in the deeper muscles around the hip. Used to call it sciatica, now deep gluteal pain syndrome, because it's not always the sciatic nerve and it's not always the piriformis muscle, right? Sometimes it's other things, and it's important to understand that. Again, when we got pain going down the leg, it's important. Is this a disc problem, a stenosis problem, sciatica, or deep gluteal pain syndrome, whatever it might be? So if you think you fall into one of those categories and you've been working through something like that, understand that it might not be what you think it is, right? It's not always sciatica. Shoulder pain, labrums, we all got labrum problems. Biceps tendon tear, rotator cuff tear, tendinopathy, and arthritis are big problems through the shoulder. All of these things can be worked on and improved. We most certainly do not always need surgery. There are certain cases where it's probably the best option, but you'd be surprised when you look at the true outcomes, right? If you are taking a tripod approach here, where you're looking at mobility, swing characteristics, and your pain and pain history, a lot of times we can definitely avoid that surgery. And knee pain, of course, meniscus most often, hamstring tendinopathy, chondromalacia, which is that arthritis of the kneecap, is very common, and then, of course, arthritis just in general of the knee joint true. So these are the most common things. If you have knee pain, especially if it's your lead side, that is affecting your golf swing. We want double the forces on your lead side than your trail side through the golf swing, or at least that's what's created, is 2 times more forces going through your lead side leg than your trail side leg in an efficient golf swing to create speed and power. If you got lead side problems, all sorts of characteristics start to pop up, and it is definitely holding you back. Even a history, ACL, whatever it might be, on one of the knees, brain is going to protect that thing and stop you from putting the forces that we want. And then also, sky's the limit on the swing characteristics that come from that. Again, we just talked about this a little bit, but understand the history. Aging is going to be related to your pain. Sometimes you get a little bit older and we start having pain and discomfort. The answer to that sort of pain is the right kind of movement. identify which movements are going to be best for you, and then work into those. And we're really pretty good at that. When it comes to low back pain, let's take a look at the golf swing. Reverse spine angle, early extension, slide and sway. This hiking is a big one, especially for Will Zalatoris there. And then excessive lateral tilt, S posture. All this stuff puts extra compression through the low back, especially, right? And so these things specifically, go and look through your swing, some swing videos, and see, are these characteristics present? If you have low back pain, now we have to start thinking, is the low back due to these problems, or do these problems create the low back pain, right? But it doesn't matter anymore at this point. Both are playing into each other, right? So see if those things are present, and if you're not sure what those look like, let me know. I'll be happy to take a look at your swing and just see what's going on. Again, from my perspective, it's just trying to relate it back to the physical. I'm not there to give you some drills to fix the actual swing itself. At most, I'll give you some drills just to help encourage these joints to move into positions and create force, just so the brain learns what that's actually like. And then you got to go see your guy. Shoulder pain, over the top's really heavily related to shoulder pain. This kind of hiking over the top motion. Sometimes people have arthritis first, and that works into that. It kind of encourages that. Sometimes this is creating the extra stress that leads to that arthritis. Casting and scooping, especially if you're talking about putting these extra forces and compression in through impact. And then this excessively steep attack angles. If you're hitting a lot off turf and sims, shoulder pain is common. Knee pain coming from slide and sway, early extension, and spinning out. Slide and sway, as we almost get into a valgus, or this kind of side knee bend position when we slide too much. Same thing with the sway. Early extension, we're just creating too much extension through that knee prematurely, and it's going to take the brunt of it thereafter. And then spinning out, it's just, we're adding a lot of rotation through that lower extremity, that leg and knee, and it doesn't really like it too much. So we got to get strong to resist those rotation forces. And again, it just so happens that creates a lot of speed too. So an article I wrote, again, this is a great way to think about it. What's kind of getting missed from the PTs, the chiros, the MDs when it comes to golfers with pain? We talked a little bit about it earlier. Your pain is much more than your diagnosis. So you might have a facet irritation problem in your low back. That's not the extent of your problem. It's the missing hip internal rotation. If we go back to our example from earlier, if you have 8 degrees of hip internal rotation and 10 on the other side, and you have facet irritation, if you don't improve the hip mobility, you're going to continue to have facet irritation. So you have to move beyond the symptoms. What else is going on through the chain? Treating the hip or low back pain for thoracic spine rotation, as another example, for shoulder pain, is what we should be looking at. Sometimes the low back is a major driver of your shoulder pain, and vice versa. A great example of this is if you're exercising and doing shoulder press. If you don't have shoulder mobility, you're going to use your low back to get that weight back over center of mass, because this is a whole lot easier than being stuck forward and then trying to drive this weight up and forward. Your shoulder's going to catch on fire right away. You're never going to do it. So instead, you're going to extend through your low back. So a shoulder restriction problem just created low back pain, because now we're hyperextending our low back to get into position to make this shoulder press possible. You have to look beyond the pain. Point 2 in this article I've written, stretching is not the answer. I've written a lot on this. Let me know if you want me to send them to you. You're just fighting tension with tension at that point, especially if there's pain present. If you ever go somewhere and you're just getting some stretching, you need to get out of there. What else might be available or happening? So our lat test as an example. In our lat test, TPRI's lat test, we put your low back flat against the wall, your mid back against the wall, and the back of the head against the wall. Then we ask you from here to see if you can touch your thumb to the wall by keeping your elbows straight. And so what we're doing is testing your shoulder flexion, but we're taking away key compensations, which is that low back, which you just talked about, which is you trying to get into extension. Nope, take that away. If you can't do that, can you complete the test? Thoracic hyperextension or even flexion sometimes can be helpful. What we're testing for here is we're putting you into max extension through your T-spine, and if that's a problem for you or you don't get there very often, it's going to take away from the shoulder. Back of the head, and then of course now we're testing the shoulder and the shoulder joint true, as well as that lat. So if we have a shoulder problem, it doesn't mean that low back's not connected. We can stretch this lat all day long to try to get you to touch that wall, but if the lat isn't the problem and it's this low back that's not getting into a neutral position, that's what's going to be the problem that stops you from completing this lat test. right? So there's all sorts of things going on. Stretching is never the answer. It's not going to fix a joint capsule problem. It's not going to fix a tendinopathy or joint loading problem, and it certainly doesn't fix the biomechanics, right? All it addresses is muscle extensibility, and that's rarely the problem. And then hitting benchmark standards should be the absolute minimum. So a lot of times there's simple tests that will do, and then you're free to go. Anyone that's had ACL surgery in rehab, you've probably fallen short on your rehab, and it's not your fault. But you'll hit the standards, and then you're out playing, and then guess what happens is you tear your other ACL. Maybe you've experienced that, or someone you know has. But that's because they've reached benchmark standards and were set free. And this is true for folks with hip replacements, knee replacements, shoulder replacements, microdiscectomies, whatever it might be, minor and big surgeries. You do your typical rehab PT stuff, do the normal joint range of motion stuff. It's critical, and then you're free to go. But I guarantee these patterns have been changed drastically, and it's going to affect future pain problems and certainly your golf swing, right? So hitting benchmark standards is the absolute minimum. My favorite thing to do is work with folks that have had a surgery and went through their insurance PT. It's like, now it's time to get to work. Let's go and put you through a comprehensive evaluation. We're going to find all sorts of crazy stuff, and then we get to work, right? After that, we get to work. Again, movement patterns are there to protect us sometimes, and then they go wrong, and then they create the problems, right? And so if we have joints locked down, it was there for a reason at some point, and now it's just creating the compression that's creating the problem. So hitting benchmark standards is the absolute minimum. Cool. So some resources that I've included in here that have kind of been part of the outline. First is Golf Without Limitations, the Golfer's Manual Pain-Free Swing. Let me know. I'll send it to you. It goes through 3 different regions. There's some tests in there. There's videos. There's links to videos that you can go and look at some stuff and test yourself a little bit. And there'll be some circuits in there too. They're generic because it's not for you. It's kind of for everyone, but they might be helpful to you. And again, it'll address a few different joint regions. And then the articles that were a part of this that I had kind of mentioned. These are all available on the blog page, but they're dispersed around. So if you want to learn more about that kinetic sequence, again, I got detailed videos within the article and different things like that. This tells you more about the exam, NGAC case study, body swing connection article. All this stuff's in there. Again, it might be hard to find it. Shoot me a text at the number. Just text me, honestly, email me, whatever. Give me a call, and I'll send them to you. And then, of course, if you want to take a look at what you get going in more detail, you let me know. So cool. That's the clinic, Chiropractic Plus Plus, I call it, right? You won't recognize it as chiropractic. This is what we do. Comprehensive approach, team approach. I love to talk with swing professionals that you're working with and see what they're seeing, especially in the swing analysis. Makes it a lot easier. I just let them tell me what's going on. And then from there, I get to communicate what we're seeing on the physical, and we've had a lot of success that way with folks dealing with pain, folks not dealing with pain, just dealing with restrictions, and they know it's affecting their golf swing. So yeah, no, it exists, and it is built for everyone that saw that this webinar was happening, right? Because it went all to different golf clubs here in Nashville, and my newsletter, folks that I've met out there on the range at different events and things like that. So again, it exists, and it is built for you. From there on out, there's the email, phone number, and some just different things that we do. And I do have a webinar specific deal for that comprehensive eval. So anyone interested, let me know, and we'll hook you up, and we'll get all the data out there on the board and see what's going on. Very good. Thanks for signing up. Thanks for RSVPing, and then anyone checking out the recording, again, feel free to reach out and let me know if you have any questions. I'm here to help. Thanks for signing on, guys. See you.